Jim Cathcart's professional speaking achievements look like a list of dream goals for most speakers. President of the National Speakers Association, Speakers Hall of Fame, Sales and Marketing Hall of Fame in London, a top 1% TEDx video with millions of views, 22 published books, 3,300 highly paid speeches worldwide, 5 years of lectures in mainland China, and speaking engagements in all 50 states and around the world. Jim received the Golden Gavel Award from Toastmasters International, which has been presented annually since 1959 to an individual distinguished in the fields of communication and leadership. He also received the Cavett Award from the National Speakers Association. That award was created to celebrate and honor those members whose careers demonstrate the spirit of sharing, guiding, and inspiring other professional speakers. In addition to speaking, Jim is a guitarist and singer-songwriter, a fitness enthusiast who has logged over 10,000 miles of running mountain trails after age 60, and a lifetime member of the American Motorcyclist Association. Jim's personal purpose is to help people live a more abundant life. Welcome, Jim, and thanks for joining us on Life
Well, thank you for
Excellence.
that generous introduction, Brian. It's wonderful to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you. Jim, you're a phenomenally successful speaker by any measure, but I'm guessing you didn't grow up thinking, hey, geez, I want to be a motivational speaker when I grow up. What, what sparked your interest in personal development, first of all, and in speaking specifically? And how did that interest develop into a now 40 plus year career?
Well, I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. I live in Austin, Texas today, and for 37 years I was in California. But I grew up in Little Rock. Dad was a telephone repairman, mom was a homemaker, and took care of my grandfather, who was an invalid from a stroke and spent the last 7 years of his life in a hospital bed in our front bedroom. So, mom was taking care of him along with my grandmother and me and my little sister, and dad was on the road as a telephone lineman and then a repairman. So I didn't expect much growing up, and I dreamed of being my heroes, like being a cowboy movie star like Roy Rogers, which dates me, or somebody like Tarzan or John Wayne or whatever. So it was all movie stars or Elvis Presley. I thought that was pretty cool. I wanted to be like him. But I had no hope of doing that because I couldn't see the path. And then years later, when I was working in a government agency as a clerk for $500 a month, 525, I was newly married, had a baby at home, no college degree, no money in the bank, 50 pounds overweight, 2 pack a day smoker, never been fit, and didn't have a high IQ. And on the radio, I heard someone like you. I heard Earl Nightingale, the dean of personal motivation. He was on 900 radio stations all over the world at that time in the 1970s. And he said, if you will spend 1 extra hour every day studying your chosen field, in 5 years or less, you'll be a national expert. In 7 years, an international expert. And I thought, well, an hour a day, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, 5 years, that's 1,250 hours. One subject, this guy's telling the truth. As long as that subject narrow. If it's a subject like medicine, too broad. If it's something like ear, nose, and throat, that's fine. If it's something like philosophy, a little too broad. But if you're going to be teaching philosophy, that's just fine. So whatever you focus on, if you can narrow that field more and more and stay that path for 5 years, putting in an extra hour beyond the normal workday every day, studying that, man, your advancement will be phenomenal. Well, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I thought about it for weeks. And then it hit me, I want to do what he does. I want to help other people succeed. Problem, I had never succeeded. You cannot lift someone to a level you're not on. So I didn't know what to do. And then it occurred to me, he'd just told me, spend an hour extra every day studying this field of personal development, and in 5 years you'll know enough. And so I figured I was starting from way behind. So I overcompensated 2, 3 hours a day, entire weekends, listening to recordings, reading all the classic self help books of the day, which at that time was pretty limited. It was Think and Grow Rich, Power of Positive Thinking, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Psycho Cybernetics, As a Man Thinketh, a few things like that. But there weren't all the books there are today. Today there are millions, it seems. And
Sure.
so I focused on personal development without knowing a thing about it and became fanatically dedicated to learning about it. And within a year, I joined the Junior Chamber of Commerce, JC's, and I found out they had a group discussion program called Leadership in Action, and that it was all about goal setting and personal development and interpersonal communication and things like that. So I said, hey, I want to help. And they said, okay, here's the manual. You lead the discussions. Okay, what is important about goal setting, Brian? I was that awkward at first. And I led the discussions. It went well and it kept getting better. I went to 400 JC's meetings after work and on weekends in 2 years for free. No income from it at all. In fact, I paid to go to some of them. But 400 meetings in 2 years, you will start knowing what you're talking about. Because I was leading these discussions and going through these manuals, and man, I had the manuals memorized after 30 or 40 sessions. And so I really knew how to do this and do it well. And then I started getting requests from businesses to come and give a speech or lead a discussion with their group. And then that led to more and more. And I bought a big, expensive library of Earl Nightingale's recordings and listened to them fanatically every day. And then I started selling them in 1974. And I was selling them door to door to businesses. I was selling a library, 48 audio recordings on personal development to businesses, and no businesses were buying anything on personal development. So it was a struggle, but I did okay at it. Now, fast forward 10 years, I had developed the skills and the knowledge I needed. I got into the field of training and development. At first, I was teaching other people's courses, and then I started developing my own. So 10 years later, I'm in California, got my own business. I've formed a partnership with a college professor, Dr. Tony Alessandra, and the phone rings, and it's Earl Nightingale. I said, yes. He said, may I speak to Jim Cathcart? He knew my name. And that's the guy I've been listening to. That's the guy whose tapes I used to sell. And he said, Mr. Cathcart, I read an article of yours that would make a good recorded program, audio program. Cassettes was what they used back in those days. And
Yeah.
I said, well, sir, the article you're referring to is an audio program we produced. He said, well, I produce those. I said, oh, believe me, I know. He said, send me yours. And if I like it and you re-record it to our specs, then we will publish it. So I sent it to him and he published it. The title was Relationship Strategies for Dealing with the Differences in People. It was on personality types, first audio album ever widely published on that subject anywhere in the nation. And Nightingale Conant Corporation, in the first 2 years of selling that, sold $3.5 million worth.
Wow.
Tony and I went from being obscure little consultants to being world famous. And our careers just took off. We were both doing about 120 speeches a year, which is 240 round trips. That's amazing.
That is amazing. And I definitely want to jump into that idea of relationship selling and talk about that book that really put you on the map in many respects, and of course led to you writing and publishing a number of other books. But I want to just delve into speaking And I'm going to ask a question that you've answered a little bit. You've given one of the nuggets or the secrets to your success. But I read, Jim, that there are roughly 3,500 members of the National Speakers Association.
Yeah, give or
That's an
take, depending
organization
on
that
the year, it ebbs and flows between 2,500 and 4,000 typically.
yeah, and so that's 2,500 to 4,000 people who are either speaking full time or at least have the desire to do so. Now, at this stage in your career, you've obviously, and I read the bio, so everybody knows now, you've obviously achieved the pinnacle of success in your industry. And I'm curious, what is it that differentiates, say, not just you, but let's expand it a little bit. So the top 10% in the speaking industry from the rest of the membership. So, what
Well,
qualities do they possess that others don't? And what are you and the rest of the top 10% doing on an ongoing basis to achieve that level of success in the speaking business? Is it just, I know it's way more than the 1 hour per day,
oh
and I
yeah,
know that
yeah,
got you started, but you're doing a lot of things, and the rest of the top 10% are doing a lot of things that cause you to be in that top 10%. And I'd
truly.
love for you to share a little bit of insight around that.
Well, a few years ago, I took on the job of being the chair of the audio magazine, I guess you could call it, for the Speakers Association, Voices of Experience. And it was an interview style audio that was produced every month. And I had the opportunity in 1 year to interview, just like this interview, a direct interview with 110 self made millionaires. Well, that's substantial. That's quite
Sure.
a rare air, right? And I chose all these people in advance because of their level of success. So these were the top 10 percenters and some of them top 1 percenters. And I was asking them, how do you operate and what's the thinking behind that? What's your own philosophy toward life, toward business, toward yourself, toward your customers, toward your work? And I really did explore it. And I found that there are certain qualities shared by those in the top of the industry. And this may be true in other industries as well, but I know it's certainly true in speaking. Of the traits that stood out for me, number one, not a single one of them succeeded by accident. And that's universal. People don't succeed by accident. Nobody does. A few people have stumbled onto a winning lottery ticket in their field and sort of became successful because of whatever that was. But if they're not the kind of person
Mhm.
that belongs there, they can't sustain. Easy for me to say, can't sustain it. That's what I was trying to say.
Right.
Um, and that's the whole point. When I'm speaking, I tell people, don't just be an arrow shooting at your target. Become a magnet attracting what you want. Develop in yourself the qualities that will attract to you the lifestyle, the friendships and relationships, and the outcomes that you dream about. And that means develop solid character, be a person who can be trusted by others, become a professional, be an honorable individual, be not just willing, but demand to be held accountable for what you do or what you neglect to do. Put yourself on the line. Never stop learning and learn from everybody, even the people at the lowest stations of life, because they know something you don't yet. And in that area, you can become more enlightened by listening to them and paying attention and honoring their input. And then become, and by the way, I'm still talking about the qualities I observed in those multimillionaires.
Yes.
Become more intentional about every single thing you do. I teach a course called Going Pro, where I mentor people into developing their own careers as a subject expert. And the 5 things that I focus on are looking at everything they do, increase intentionality, increase accountability, increase their knowledge, and never stop increasing that, increase their discipline, and increase their honorability. In other words, be honorable in what you do. Be worthy of other people's respect. Don't just get people to admire you because you're successful.
Mhm.
Have people saying to themselves, I want the qualities he or she has. I want to be that kind of person. That's someone I would trust my kids with, someone I would trust my passwords and bank accounts with. That's a person of character.
Yeah, Jim, what I hear is some of what you're talking about is mindset, and I know that you write and speak about the idea that to improve performance, we must first change the way we think,
Yeah.
and I heard that in a lot of your response. Why is the I call it the head stuff, right? What's going on between our ears? Why is mindset so critical? And what are some practical things that we can do to advance how we approach those areas of our life?
Well, the single dominant factor in your life is the way you think, because the way you think leads to the way you act, the decisions you make, the choices you make, and the ways you feel. So everything grows from how you think. If you think the world is evil and there is no creator and this is all you've got, this life, then your life is going to be a life of greed and selfishness. You're going to be trying to get yours while you can, and you're not going to trust anybody. That's all mindset. It could have had totally different behaviors, but those are the patterns that grow out of that sick and sad mindset. If your mindset is what Carol Dweck called a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, what others have called a scarcity mindset. If you believe there's a limited amount available and everything is pretty much fixed and you've got to get it while the getting's good, then that leads to one pattern of behavior. If you believe, on the other hand, that even Earth is alive, not just people and animals, but the entire planet is a living system. And if it's a living system, that means it's constantly growing and evolving. It's sloughing off unproductive parts or old parts and growing new ones and changing and morphing into something better constantly. Well, if that's the case physically, isn't that the case economically? Isn't that the case interpersonally? Isn't that the case spiritually? You know, if we say that the universe is ever expanding and humans don't know how to think about that because everything we think about has limits, and we say the universe is ever expanding, expanding out to what? Where's the edge? We don't know how to think without an edge. So we put edges around ourselves. And the trouble is, the mindset brings those edges in way too far. And people live little tiny versions of the life they could live if they had cultivated a much greater, more enlightened mindset. I recognize that my mindset was very limited, that I didn't expect much of myself because others didn't expect much of me when I was growing up. Mom and dad basically taught me, be a good person, do your duty, do your chores, um, do what a good person would do, and then get out of the way because other people need that seat, right? So I figured I'd live a decent life, be a nice guy, retire at 65, and die at whatever statistical age my gene pool was scheduled for. That was it. And then I started getting exposed to ideas like Earl Nightingale had presented, and I thought, well, if I'm going to embrace ideas this big, I've got to recondition my mind. So I listened to those recordings. They're back here on my shelf even to this day. I listened to those recordings 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours a day for 5 solid years, listening to inspiring recordings talking about fundamental truths about life and about how to succeed in any type of dealing. And it just constantly led me to better and better ideas, which led to better and better behaviors. I talk about a causation chain, and I show a staircase, And at the base of the staircase is mindset. And the next step up from that is actions, because your mindset leads to the choices you make, which manifest as the actions you take. Well, the actions you take, repeated over time, become the habits you've acquired. Do the same thing again and again and again. Sooner or later, you don't have to think about it. It just is your automatic tendency. It becomes your default mode. So the habits are the outgrowth of the actions that came from the mindset. Well, the rest of the world doesn't know you until they observe you. So they see, oh, look, there's Brian. Well, wonder what Brian's like. So they watch Brian. Well, what they see is a pattern of Brian's actions, the way he talks, the places he goes, people he associates with, the things he thinks about and talks about, and so forth. In other words, your habits are your reputation once observed by other people. So, how do you build a good reputation? Good actions, which form into good habits. Then the other people see that, and that's the reputation you not only own, but deserve. Your reputation tells the world whether it's good to spend time with you or would be better to avoid you. So, good reputation doors open, bad reputation doors shut. And your reputation grows straight out of your relationships grow straight out of your reputation. So, if you've got relationships with the kind of people that can open the right kind of doors for you, wow, then your future has just exploded into a whole new realm that wouldn't have been possible with a fixed mindset where you were worried about who else was getting something before you did.
Why is it, do you think? So you had the opportunity to interview 110 people, I think you said
Mm-hmm.
110 very high achievers. And I know your purpose, Jim, is to help people live a more abundant life.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, you've been around a while, you've been exposed to personal development for over 40 years. Why aren't more people exposed to this?
Well, I think everybody's exposed to it now. It's like when I started as a speaker, professional speaker, I used to tell people, they'd say, "What do you do?" And I'd say, "I'm a professional speaker." They'd say, "What's that? People just pay you to speak?" And I said, "Yeah, just to hear my voice." And they said, "Really?" I said, "No. They pay me to bring them a message that is worth paying to hear." "Oh, well, what do you talk about?" "Well, I could tell you, but then I'd have to bill you." And so I do that as just a little playful thing, and then I explain to them that my field is applied behavioral
Mhm.
science, and I personally live an abundant life in every way that I can, and I teach others how to make their lives more abundant, because the more fully you live, the more gifts you give to the world, the more you help and make things better for other people as well as for yourself. So back then, back in the 1970s and 80s, very few people had even heard about these ideas. And motivation was brand new. "Oh, you're a motivator? Wow, I've heard about you kind of people. Tell me about that." Well, today, it's common knowledge, right? You say, "What do you do for a living?" "Professional speaker." Ha ha ha. Yeah, like what? Like Tony Robbins? Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did the fire walk with him. I had lunch with him a couple of years after,
Mhm.
and I've seen him and chatted with him at various. "Oh, you actually met Tony Robbins?" "Yeah. When I went full time as a professional speaker, he was 12 years old." "Oh, so you really are a professional speaker?" "Yes, as a matter of fact." And then all of a sudden they start paying attention. Well, why are more people not interested in that? Because you've had Zig Ziglar and W. Clement Stone and Og Mandino and Napoleon Hill and gosh, on and on, all the big names over all these years, and it's out there. Why don't people do it? Because it feels like work at first.
Mm.
Because their mindset that they've embraced is a limited mindset. And when they see something like that and they say, "Well, yeah, he could do it, but not me." Now, look for a moment at my example. I didn't score high on IQ tests. I hadn't been an athlete. I was overweight and out of shape. I didn't have a college degree. I came from working class parents. I had never been encouraged to dream big dreams and think about a big, life that made a difference. I thought my life would be ordinary and that I would do my part as a drone in the beehive and I would die when the appointed time came. That's all I expected until Earl Nightingale's recording cracked the egg open and showed me that what was inside. And I started realizing, wow, if I really were disciplined about studying one field, I could master that field. I could become really, really knowledgeable about one particular field. Wonder what I would like to become knowledgeable about. Didn't know. And then discovered that what he was doing was what fascinated me the most. So I said, okay, 5 years or maybe 7 or 10 or 15, however long it takes from now, I will become one of the leading uh, experts in the field of personal development. And 22 books later, with two more books, one already written, the other one 95% done, just needs forward and a few other things to put it to bed. I'm soon going to have 24 books plus many books translated around the world into various languages, a lot of them in Mandarin and some in Polish and Romanian and German and Spanish and, on and on and on. Um, Gosh, look at the number of lives I've been able to touch coming from the background I came from. But had I not had the inspiration available through books and recordings and articles and podcasts and things like are available to people today, if I hadn't had that information available and forced myself to listen to it, pay attention to it, and think about it, then my life would have ended up being what I expected back then.
So part of it was exposure. And as you explained, you were exposed to Earl Nightingale. Sometimes people come into contact personally with people and that changes their lives. Other
Yep.
times they read a book or maybe they attend a seminar or workshop, or now there's a lot online that people can be exposed to.
Or
And then
there's a guest speaker at a convention. That's I've done
absolutely.
3,300 of those, so I've reached most of the people I've reached, not through my books and recordings, but through live in-person address to anywhere from a dozen to thousands and thousands of people at a time.
And so for you, that was the starting point, and for a lot of people, it was the
Yeah.
starting point. But a lot of people, as you know, are exposed to those books, or they meet those people, or they attend those events, and they still don't make the decision like you did to take that and to utilize it and to improve your life.
And I think that's
What
because of
else?
self-doubt.
Share more about that if you would.
Well, whenever I talk to an audience, at the end, I stick around and I either sign autographs or take selfies with people or whatever in order to provide a forum for them to
Wait a
ask.
minute. Do you take the selfies, or do
No, they
the
do.
20-year-olds?
Or I pose for pictures with a photographer that's on site. Like in China, after one of my speeches to about 3,000 people, I had spoken for 6 hours through an interpreter who was standing at my side. I had 6 hours in front of 3,000 people. And at the end, I found that they had sold the privilege of having a private photograph made with Jim. Well, they didn't tell me this beforehand. They surprised me with it at the end. And they said, okay, we're going to go to dinner and you're done now, except we have a few people who want to have their picture taken with you. And I said, well, okay. And so I was about to take my jacket off and get ready to go get in the car and go to dinner. And they said, oh, no, 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 you've got to keep the jacket on and pose for these pictures. These people paid for the privilege. And I said, okay, expecting a dozen. 700 people.
Oh my goodness.
700, they were herding them through like cattle. Okay, okay, you sit, look at camera. Okay, smile. Okay, next. Okay, no, get up, move. And I was trying to be polite to these people, and they're treating them like animals. But I did that. 700 photos. Well, the point of all this, making myself available not in that sense, but in the voluntary sense, is I want the questions and comments that people give. And so people come to me privately and they say, Jim, I love what you're saying and it's so encouraging and I'd love to do that, but I couldn't do it. And I say, really? Why is that? And invariably, the reasons they give me are never solid reasons. They're just self doubt. They just have not been able yet to push themselves into that photograph and see themselves growing and improving and becoming successful. So I ask them very, very fundamental questions. Could you do this? Yeah. Well, if you could do that, could you also do this? Yeah. Well, those are the first two steps. Oh, oh. It's like, Jim, I can't do push-ups. You do, you do push-ups every day. I can't do push-ups. Really? I said, would you do something for me? I said, I'm gonna give you an easy way to do a push-up. Well, I can't do. I know. Would you just lay down on your face on the floor, put your arms at your sides? Well, I did, Jim. Yeah, I know. Just do that. And so they do that, and I say, okay, thanks. And they say, what do I do now? I said, doesn't matter. What do you mean, doesn't matter? No matter what they do, they have to do a push-up to get up. So they're either going to do one where they roll on their side or something, but they're going to do a push-up. And so, okay, now you've done one. If you did that twice a day, that's 100% improvement. That's two. So you can do push-ups. You just haven't done many yet. When I started, I could do maybe 18. And then I got to where I could do 100. And I would stop at about 80, 85 and go back on my knees and catch my breath and then do the other 15 or 20. And I did for 5 consecutive years, ending at the end of 2021. 5 consecutive years, never missed a day, doing 100 push-ups every day. And well, technically I did. One week I was ill, and so I skipped 3 days. But as soon as I started recovering, I doubled up on the push-ups to do the requisite number to check that box.
It's amazing the things that we're capable of, and this goes back to mindset, and it also goes back to just the decision that people don't want to work at all to do it. I mean, there
Well,
isn't
and also they
a
pick up on their
small.
parents and friends and teachers and other people around them. They pick up on the observations those people made long ago, which are long since obsolete. But oh well, Jimmy's not very good at math, or Janie's not an athletic type, or Bob really finds it awkward to deal with other people, and so has kind of an emotional sensitivity, so you got to be careful. We hear that kind of stuff from other people and we accept it as truth. Well, says who? What do they know? What made them so knowledgeable that they could limit the rest of our life with a brand like that and not have us revise the news about it? If someone says I've got COVID, okay, then let's treat the COVID and recover, not say, oh, I'm sorry, I can no longer do anything. I'm doomed forever to be a person with COVID. No, it's a disease. It's a condition. It passes, right? I know because I've had it. Um, the same thing's true for weakness in your muscles or from a lack of flexibility in your movement or for, any number of other things. There are workarounds. I mean, if you ever want to be encouraged, watch the Paralympics. Look at the people without arms or legs, the people with severe difficulties, and look at the amazing things they do physically. Go to the Special Olympics. I had the phenomenal honor of being the keynote speaker for the USA Special Olympics in the year 2010. It was in Lincoln, Nebraska, and there were 13,800 people in the audience and about 3,600 special athletes. And I was there as the keynote speaker among all these world famous celebrities and political leaders and public figures and all that, and all these Olympians who were coming to support the Special Olympics athletes. And those folks, I mean, they're dealing with serious impediments going into that competition, and yet they sustain a happy spirit and they give it their all, and they're not worried so much about the score they get from somebody else who doesn't understand their situation.
I'm really glad you talked about that because it really illustrates the limiting beliefs that we tell ourselves. I mean, we're all
Yeah.
telling ourselves stories every day, right? And some of those stories are small stories that are maybe inconsequential. And but you were talking earlier about some of the stories that we've been carrying around for years that maybe our parents told us or our grandparents told us or that we heard from teachers or other students or
Yeah.
just people around us, and how that becomes our belief system, that becomes our reality. And it doesn't have to. When you see athletes like in the Paralympics or in Special Olympics, or you read stories about just these amazing physical endeavors, amazing mental endeavors, it really helps to put it in perspective what's possible. And it
And it's not
also, when
just
I
in the
hear,
physical world, it's also in the intellectual world and in the business world and interpersonal dealings. And, there's just all sorts of manifestations of that.
absolutely. I'd like to talk about a couple of your books, Jim. I think it would take us probably a week to fully discuss all your books, and including the one that's written but not published, and the one that you're working on that isn't yet published. But I'd like to touch on a couple of them in the short time that we have
Sure.
today. One of your early bestsellers, and you mentioned it, the work that you did with Tony Alessandra, and in the area of relationships, but the book Relationship Selling: The Eight Competencies of Top Sales Producers.
Yep.
Jim, in that book, you wrote that relationships must be treated as assets. I know you wrote that in the context of selling, but tell us why relationships are so important, both professionally and personally. And also, what are a couple things that we can do to build great relationships if we're talking about business
You got
with
it.
our customers or clients, like you wrote about in the book? And also, though, in our personal lives, in our own sphere of influence, if we're talking about personal relationships.
Certainly. Well, let's first define a relationship. People say, well, it's and they guess. In other words, there's not a universal definition of relationship that all people just roll right off their tongues. They say, well, it's people it's a connection, it's someone you're friends with, if someone, somebody that trusts you. Fine, and those are all useful responses. But let's just come up with a, a definition we can agree on. A relationship is a direct connection between people, because you can't have a relationship with a thing. You can be in a physical sense related to something, but it's not a relationship in this context. It's a direct connection between people in which value is exchanged. Well, the question comes up, what is value? Well, value is whatever the recipient deems to be valuable. So, in other words, I could have a beautiful diamond that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I give it to you. And if you don't care about diamonds or care about tangible wealth, then I conveyed what I thought was value, but you didn't perceive that you received value. So value is always and only determined by the receiver of the value. You might find that my undivided attention for 5 minutes is worth more than $1,500 of cash. Great. I'll save myself a little cash and I'll focus on you for heaven's sakes. But still, that whatever you value, that's the thing you're looking for from other people, and those who help you get it are the ones you want to stay connected with. So a relationship is a direct connection in which value is exchanged. All right. So how do you form a relationship? Make a direct connection with another person. You pull up to a toll booth, you look up at the person in the booth, and they say $5, and you give them $5 and you leave. Is that a relationship? Well, it could ultimately be, but it was just a transaction, because transaction is the earliest uh, form of relationship. I guess maybe an earlier form would be acknowledgement. I see you, you see me. Next, right? No relationship, but we saw each other exist. And then we have a transaction, and that's another level. That's where we're actually engaged with each other. But next time you go to that same toll booth, you say, "Good afternoon." And the person smiles back at you. Now, then it's progressing along a little continuum toward a friendship or more of a robust relationship. Then you pull up one day and it's going kind of slow. There's no traffic behind you. And you say, "Hey, I've seen you here every day. What's your name?" "My name's Jim." And now then you know each other's name. And next time you pull up, it's, "Brian, good to see you again. How's your day?" "Great, thanks." And you go on your way. Well, that may never become anything, but then again, you could run into Brian at a grocery store, strike up a conversation, find you have something in common, end up doing business together, and who knows, a year or two down the road, become partners in some kind of a venture and build a lifelong friendship. So relationships start with just proximity and grow all the way through bonded commitment to each other. And there are stages along that continuum that can be used as milestones. And you know how to offer value in the early stages and the greater stages, and make it more and more and more value in different forms, more customized as the relationship evolves. That's the same way you grow a business. Let people know you exist, connect with them somehow, offer some form of value that makes them want to stay connected for a little while, make it so valuable that they want to stay connected indefinitely, and then grow them into the best client you ever had. Now, if you look at your life, reflecting back over your life, and I ask you, where'd you grow up? What was it like? Where'd you go to school? What was it like? Where'd you work? What was it like? Have you been married? What's that like? And so forth. In every case, you will reflect upon relationships. And the people we are connected with at those stages of our life determine the quality of our life experience at that particular point in time. So if you want a more abundant life, be a little bit more discerning in who you reach out to connect with and who you just accept by default into your circle, because some people are not good for you. Some people bring clouds and sadness everywhere they go, and it would be best if we would diminish the amount of time we spend with those folks. We don't have to cut them off entirely, but we certainly don't have to invite them over for dinner. And if you're in a situation where you're connected with some people like that all the time, just change the percentage of your time that is spent directly with them, because I understand we don't have complete control over who we're going to see and when and how we're going to see them, but we can certainly control what the nature of that involvement is for the time we're there.
Oh, that's great. That's really terrific. And I talk a lot and write about the concept of surrounding yourself with success. And it's really the same thing. And surrounding yourself with success to me can include environment. It can include some external things, but
Yep.
primarily it's about the relationships in your life. And like I say, you want to evaluate the quality of those relationships. And first of all, you assess who you're spending your time with. So you look
Exactly.
around, who are the people in my life? And then the second part of it is, what effect are they having on me? So I'm hanging out with this guy named Jim, and he's a speaker. And what effect is he having on me
Yeah.
through
Is
our
he good for me
dialogue?
and
Through,
helping me
through
grow, or is he
yeah,
limiting me? I
that's
do an
exactly right.
exercise similar to that with my clients and my proteges. I lead them through a process that I call their inner circle, where they identify who's in it, who's in the inner circle, who's in their outer circle, and which ones are there by choice and which ones are there by default, or you just picked them up, along the way, accumulated people. And then I look at the quality of each relationship, because a relationship to thrive has to have three essentials. Both parties are committed to making it successful. You can't do it from one side only. You can have it change power from time to time, more coming from this one, more coming from that one, but you cannot have only one person committed to it. Otherwise, that's you're just stalking or they're stalking. It's a dysfunctional relationship. Commitment, number one. Number two, open communication, meaning the truth, good or bad, flows freely between the two of you, that you don't feel you're being judged or put down or manipulated by the other person, that you can tell them the truth and they can tell you the truth. And the third essential is clear agreements, understanding what you can expect from them and what they expect from you, and agreeing to that so that you know what expectations are reasonable. So it's commitment, communication, and clear agreements. And when you look at your inner circle and you do that little evaluation, you immediately discover where your homework is. And your homework will either be repairing or building a relationship, or eliminating or diminishing a relationship. And and that makes you much, much more intentional, much more strategic, and much more effective in getting around yourself the kind of people that feed and nurture your nature. You say surround yourself with success. Well, what if you don't have any success to bring to the party? Then be very humble and very grateful and very willing to be helpful to the other people and earn your place. That's what I did when I first got into speaking. I was the junior in all the gatherings of people, and I was around all my heroes, all these big deal stars with books, and they were famous, that kind of thing. So I just said, how can I help? And I was a willing helper, and I was humble, and I expressed my gratitude, but I didn't grovel and say, "Oh my God, oh you're so great, oh I appreciate that." No, I was cool about it, but I was absolutely sincere about it at the same time.
That's terrific. There's one more concept that I wanted to ask you about in the
Okay,
sales area. And like relationships, this is something that you wrote about in relationship to becoming an excellent salesperson. But in fact, it's something that can be expanded. And I'd like to expand it because obviously our audience isn't comprised of just salespeople. But
sure.
you wrote that to become an excellent salesperson, you must go the extra mile and not just act as though you're going through the motions of your job. Tell us about that concept, if you would. And again, if you don't mind, expand it beyond selling because the
Sure.
extra mile concept
Yeah,
really applies to every occupation and really to life in general.
that's easy to combine. Think like an employer for a minute. You want to assemble a team of people to grow a business that you own. What kind of people do you want? 8-hour people or whatever it takes people? Well, whatever it takes people, that costs too much. Okay, get
Sure.
them in their early stages. Find people who are eager to succeed, eager to do something useful, not just greedy, wanting things, but eager to be a person worthy of respect and admiration. To be a person that others would say, I want him or her as my good friend. I want that person in my life. I had the honor of having a man say to me once, uh, I want you to be my son's godfather. And I said, well, we live in different cities and we don't see each other that often. And I don't know, how effective I could be in fulfilling that role. He said, you don't have to do anything. I just want your influence in his life. Wow. Wow. Talk about a compliment. I mean, that goes straight to the soul. I want your influence in my child's life. Man, when we set that as our target of what kind of person we want to become, then that takes on a whole different meaning. So when I look at people going the extra mile, the concept of that is, well, by the way, let me give you Tony Alessandra's twist on that. Tony said, Tony's mother, taught him, don't worry about going the extra mile, just always go the extra inch.
Hmm.
Whoa. Well, that makes it doable, right? So if you think about someone agrees to do something with you, and you've got your duties and they've got their expectations, do you fulfill the expectations or do you exceed the expectations somewhat? The other day, I hired a handyman to come here and to repair a tube that connects our air conditioning unit from the outside of our house to the house itself. And there was a crack in it. And so he arranged to come by, and I had him look at had him level the dryer in our laundry room because it was off level while he was here. So I was on a Zoom call, and he did the things he needed to do outside, and he got that all fixed. And we had left the garage door open so he could get in and out of the house and easily. And he got to the laundry room and he balanced the dryer. And then he noticed that the railing on a staircase was a little loose. And so he repaired it. And then there were a few minutes before I was through with the Zoom call where I could go and talk to him and pay him. And so he swept the leaves out of our garage. Well, hello. Thank you. And I said, how much do I owe you? He said, oh, it's a simple job, $50. I paid him 75. Well, hey, he didn't ask for it. I didn't have a reason to give it to him. I wasn't trying to win his approval. I just felt like he was worth more in that instance. He was giving me more than I was paying for, so I was willing to pay more on the spot. I was getting the value, right? And that's the attitude. Is just what else could I do while I'm here that wouldn't take much from me, but would be valued by them? Maybe it's just, you deliver something. Well, make sure the package is clean and neat so it looks nicer when they receive it. You throw a newspaper, you're a paper, you've got a paper route like I used to. Then you throw a newspaper to someone's house. Well, throw it to the porch, not the front yard. Or if you're walking your paper route, put it, maybe behind the screen door on the front if the screen door is unlocked. Do whatever's appropriate under the circumstances, but don't only do what's expected. I had friends who had paper routes, and they would just throw the papers in the yards and let it go at that. And of course, they never got tips, but I did. I'd go by to collect at the end of the month and get paid for the newspapers, and the people would say, here's a little something extra. Thank you for putting it on the porch all the time. Great. So that's the extra mile concept.
Well, and that's a concept that I wish was more universal, because my suspicion and my experience, unfortunately, is that things are sort of swinging in the other direction. Where when you go out to a restaurant today, or the newspaper example
Yeah.
that you were given, where not only are people not going the extra mile, but it seems like they're just really hard pressed to even do what's asked of
Yeah,
them.
they don't
And,
even
and
complete the first mile in a lot of
sure,
cases. But I'll tell you this,
and
the remedy to that is where you have found it. I know personally you have found that the remedy, and where I found it, luckily, early on, and that is in our home. We teach it through the way we live our lives, and we teach it to our kids, and it shows up in the way they live theirs. In the Bible, there's a quote, a passage that says, by their fruits you shall know them. I don't know what that specific passage is, and it may not even be biblical, but it sounds biblical. So, by the fruits of the tree, you shall know what kind of tree it is. By the results, the behaviors of their children, their families, you will know what kind of people and what kind of family they are. So, that's why we should be so concerned about character and about discipline and about intentionality and being honorable and seeking to become the kind of person other people want in their world. Because there's no greater honor or deeper satisfaction than that.
it's very true. And you've actually segued in. I want to ask you about one more thing, if I can, Jim. And
Okay.
you were talking about fruits and talking about trees. You and I have had the opportunity to get to know each other, and from my standpoint, it's been terrific. And
Thank you.
I've enjoyed the relationship that we've
Me too.
created. one thing that we've talked about a little bit, and I know this is near and dear to your heart. The it's the title of one of your books, and it's a subject that you talk about extensively, and it's the Acorn principle.
Yep.
If you would, for our listeners and viewers, Jim, share the meaning of this concept and
Okay.
also explain how the acorn relates to unlocking our greatest
You
potential.
bet. Well, I've got a prop. The woman who used to work with me for about 5 or 6 years, Carolyn Brown, gave me this acorn. Isn't that a beauty? It's wooden.
It is.
And if you notice, an acorn, which is the seed of an oak tree, which is also a symbol of a universal symbol of potential. You know, they say tall oaks from tiny acorns grow. An acorn has three parts: a stem that connects it to the tree, a cap that holds onto the seed until it's ready to grow on its own, and then a seed that holds the potential of the tree it will become or could become, and all the future acorns by the hundreds of thousands that would come from that tree and the other trees that grow from that. So you could start a forest that would cover the entire earth with one acorn. That's the potential that actually lives within one simple acorn. But the trouble with acorns is they are dependent on the environment. They don't have the capacity for self determination. You and I do. So the stem, this is like past, present, future. The stem represents the connection between you and me and all the people in our genetic line that ever existed throughout time. Good, bad, and ugly. All of that is in the DNA that's in you or me. The cap represents the, since it protects the seed, that's our coaches, our teachers, our parents, our mentors, our heroes, our role models, the people who have watched over us and influenced us. And the seed represents the potential that still lives within you or within me. Now, we can, if we don't like the circumstances we were planted in, we can choose new circumstances. We can move from here to there. We can branch out better than a tree can branch out. If we choose to stay with the circumstances we have, we can shape those circumstances to be friendlier to us. We can build a shelter from the rain. We can meet the neighbors and connect with them and build friendships. We can find the resources in our area and make things better for ourselves. So we can also take certain factors in our environment that may be unfriendly to us and develop ways to adapt to those so they're not as harmful or as threatening. You know, like we could, if you were wearing out the elbows of your sweater years ago, what you would do is put a leather suede patch on the elbows of your sweater. That's how that came about. And then it became a fashion thing, and they sold brand new sweaters with leather patches on the elbows. And so you can either adapt or shape or select a new environment. And that comes from the work of Robert Sternberg. Robert Sternberg is a researcher from Yale who wrote a book called The Triarchic Mind. Triarchy meaning three, and that was adapt, select, shape, or adapt, shape, select. And he illustrated how the mind functions like that. So there is potential within you to do certain things really well and other things not nearly as well. Because just like a seed, we are suited to certain things and not nearly as suited to other things. Someone like a um, Michael Phelps or Mark Spitz is genetically suited to swimming, but without the discipline and the mindset, they would never have become Olympic gold medalists. Someone like LeBron James is physically suited to basketball, but without the mindset and the discipline would never have become a world famous, legendary basketball player, Tom Brady for football, and choose other things of a non-physical nature. Everyone's suited to certain things and they find other things more difficult. Okay, so what do? Well, spend a lot of time getting better at what you're naturally suited for and find good resources to help you with the things you're not particularly suited for. My grandson is really good at mathematics. He teaches at Mathnasium. So he's a mathematics coach while he's going to college. And he's also a good athlete and he's good with music. And you think, gee, he could do anything. Well, I'm sure there are things he doesn't do very well, but he can find the tools, the software, the apps, the resources, the friends, the helpers, the specialists to outsource to on those other things. So he becomes really good at lots of things, but not just from his basic nature. Same's true for you and me.
That's terrific. Jim, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's
It's
great to
a
talk
pleasure.
to you as always, and I appreciate everything you've shared today.
It's a joy, my friend. Thank you, Brian.
Thank
Take
you
care.
again. Thanks for tuning in to Life Excellence. Please support the show by subscribing, telling your friends about the show, posting about it on social media, and leaving a rating and review. You can also learn more about me at brianbartes.com. Until next time, dream big dreams and make each day your masterpiece.